clicking the admit button, so if I get distracted, it's because of that. I'm Nick Sousanis. I run the comic studies program at San Francisco State University in San Francisco. This is an event sponsored by Comic Studies and with a grant from College of Liberal and Creative Arts Extraordinary Ideas Grant, with the idea that we wanted to bring in some speakers who talked about their career both as cartoonists and how they thrive in different spaces professionally, and talk about the ways that their design and storytelling skills translate into other potential careers beyond comics, though we really want them making comics too. So it's my real pleasure today to introduce you to Lloyd Dangle, legendary Bay Area cartoonist, whose weekly syndicated comic strip Troubletown ran from 1988 to 2011. Somewhere in there, which you'll learn about from him, he's shifted into also working as a business coach, a corporate consultant, helping businesses communicate their ideas more effectively. As has already been noted in the chat, he designed the Airborne Health Campaign. He's worked for Hewlett Packard, Amazon Web Services, and is currently living in Portugal, where, among his other things, he's started extreme travel journaling, which we're all going to learn about. So I'm just delighted you could join us, Lloyd, and be in your office with you. And thanks for coming. It's all you now.
Yeah, you're in my virtual office with me
There you
now.
go.
Nick, thanks so much, and thanks for having me. Yeah, I had had quite an interesting career with comics. I've had a wonderful, 40 years plus drawing comics and doing things in many different ways. And, when I was growing up in Michigan, the Detroit Free Press landed on my front yard every morning, and I would pick it up and go through the comics. My dad loved to read Peanuts, and I really wanted to impress my dad, so I wanted to learn how to draw comics. And there were some illustrators in the Detroit Free Press that were really amazing. And I started following cartoonists like Cliben and Ralph Steadman and all sorts of wacky cartoonists that were doing stuff back in the 70s, late 70s, like Underground Comics and like Fabulous Furry Freak Brothers and stuff like that. And I developed a love for comics. And I went to University of Michigan, where there was a humor magazine on campus. So I quit studying all of my classes and just spent all my time hanging out there with a bunch of ne'er-do-wells, drawing comics, telling funny stories, and graduated from college and went straight into like working in magazines and newspapers, which I could never imagine at the time that newspapers and magazines would ever cease to be a powerful force in the world. But, they have. But for, over 20 years, I did illustrations in magazines, drew comics for the weekly newspapers that I syndicated my comic strip Troubletown to many newspapers around the country. And it was quite a wonderful life, pre-internet, and then a little bit post-internet. But the newspapers started dwindling and it became really scary. But luckily, I have been doing enough stuff that I had a visibility where businesses started to reach out to me and ask me, can you draw something that can explain how our product works? Or like a software company that had a product that was hard to understand because it was new technology and people weren't really getting it yet. So I would be asked to do some kind of illustrations that would, at a glance, show how a product works. And I'm going to take a drink. When Airborne approached me, the health company, they had a product, not a sinus tablet, but a kind of health tablet that, everybody knows what it is now, right? You drop it in water and it's an effervescent drink that is supposed to help you not catch colds. But there had never been anything like that in the drugstore at the time. So the company, the startup, was having a really hard time explaining it to the drugstore, the drug chains like Walgreens and the ones that were the gatekeepers for all that kind of a product. So we worked together and came up with a strategy where we made a package that showed at a glance, what the product did. And on the strength, and it was a cute cartoon, you may have seen it, it had funny germs and stuff on it. And on the strength of the image, and smart marketing on behalf of the company, they went from being like nothing to a $100 million company in the period of about a year or two. So that was kind of a big success in my career, and it led to lots of other health products. There was never anything else but health products, because the companies are kind of not that, not that imaginative, but all the healthcare companies all of a sudden were like, we've never had a cartoon on a health product before, but now everybody needs one. So I spent quite a lot of time kind of talking to healthcare companies. So I did a fair amount of work with companies that needed help in that way, like explainer videos I used to make, kind of infographics, which are like cartoons that kind of explain something. And I enjoyed that, and I enjoy that kind of, dealing with complexity and figuring out how to make complex things simple. And eventually, I started doing graphic recording in meetings and conferences. I joined an organization of graphic facilitators called the IFVP, International Forum of Visual Practitioners. And I met a few people who had sort of agencies where they would send you out to a big conference and they would have you stand next to a board and draw pictures of what was going on in the conference. And that was pretty fun for a little while. And I traveled all over the world doing these little one-off days of drawing and capturing the content of meetings and drawing very fast and being really like starting to get to be good at capturing a lot of content really quickly. And it was fun, but I always felt that it was a little missing. It was just missing the mark a little bit, because you were sort of off on the side. You weren't really integrated into what was going on. And it was a little bit of like a performance, and some people enjoyed it, but it wasn't integrated into the content. And I always thought if I could find the right facilitators in the right situation, you could create a situation where a meeting that was fully illustrated could be really powerful and strategic and wonderful. And then I got a call one day out of the blue from Hewlett Packard, and they said, hey, we're forming a team doing something like what I just described. And I was like, wow, do I have to drive to Silicon Valley every day from Oakland? That'll kill me. And they said, no, you just go to the meetings when they happen, and then the rest of the time you work from home. And so I was like, I couldn't say no. It was like too good to be true. And it was like more money than I'd ever made. And at first I was like, this is the easiest job I've ever had. But then, as most things go, as you learn more about it, you realize, oh, I didn't know what I was talking about when I said it was easy. And it actually was pretty complex. And then my team and I, just kept doing these meetings over and over, and we got to be really, really good at it. And so then I went to another company, Amazon Web Services, and started a similar team there. And so for about 10 years, I helped senior leaders in really high stakes meetings make hard decisions with a lot of complex data and a lot of complex technology. And we made it simpler for them by drawing it out on the walls. We would have an 85-foot wall in a giant conference room, and we would create a storyboard of the conversations that they had. And we would structure the conversations so the right kinds of things were talked about. And there were ways that you could affect how decision makers worked together and collaborated, because you could really get the ideas out of their heads and onto a space where you can manipulate them, and magic things happened. And companies would say, leaders would say, we just got more done in one day than we've gotten done in a whole year of meetings, because you made it visual, you made it simple, and you know, led us through this decision-making process. So that was super cool. And so I've done that for a while, and then I left and I have my own company, and I coach people to transform their lives or transform their careers. Sometimes I coach teams that are trying to sell better or do better work in their companies. And I use these visual tools to help them do that kind of stuff. And then I have started my own company called Draw the Future. I have some clients that I do high stakes meetings for. And then I also have individuals, a few, like a handful of individuals that I coach and help them solve issues in their lives. Nick, any questions for me? Now I'll take a little break from talking.
Oh, there are actually. Sorry, I was going to hold off to the end, but you want to jump in now?
Sure, I'll take a couple, and then I'll show you a little cartoon I've designed for you guys.
Yeah. Before we get to Mike Rohde's question in the chat here, 85-foot wall.
Yeah, so if you imagine a giant room,
Yeah.
it goes all the way around the room.
Wow.
And the idea is you have a different image or a different part of an image
Yeah.
for each conversation that you have throughout the day. So by the end of the meeting, you've filled up 85 feet of drawing. And it's very powerful and immersive. And we had people that would come back a year later after one of our meetings and they would say, yeah, we made that decision and I was standing right over there by that wall.
Yeah.
We use the spatial intelligence of the people in the room, and using visuals and spatial intelligence, you're really allowing people to tap into intelligences that they have, but they don't normally get to use. And it's quite powerful and surprising.
Yeah. And that's awesome. I had one thing and then I'll let Mike go. Uh, uh, my own comics practice, I work on the biggest piece of newsprint I can, and I just make as many messy sketches and notes and you can see it all. And it's hard to so anytime my students or other people say how can I come up with ideas? I'm like, get the biggest piece of paper and just let your visual system go to work on what your hands are doing. But 85 feet is even better. So
Well, it's interesting that I have something to add to that, because
yeah.
and typically in business, when people have a meeting, somebody comes in with a PowerPoint presentation and shows it
Yeah.
and just talks, blah, 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 blah. And it's it's not immersive, it's not collaborative, it's a stand and deliver kind of experience. And when we get rid of the PowerPoint and we draw things on the wall, everything is open to adding to and collaborating with.
Mm-hmm.
Like when you see the PowerPoint, it looks like everything's already been decided and everything is already finished. Even if it's not finished, PowerPoint gives everything that look. So the idea of having someone stand up at the wall and draw scratchy drawings like the way you describe putting ideas in the newsprint allows people to come in and enter into the conversation. And so we would have, people telling us something. We write it on the wall. Sometimes people come into a meeting with a real agenda, like I gotta get this thing talked about because I gotta get my project off the ground. We say, hey, we wrote it on the wall over here. Did we get that right? And he's like, yeah, that's pretty right, but I would add this. Then we add a little more. And then he would say, and then we will say, did we get it? Did we get it completely right? And he says, yep, then we can move on. He doesn't have to sit there and fight for that thing all day because it's been captured and it's seen and it can be discussed. And that's part of how we accelerate the decision-making process, because a lot of the stuff that is a sticking point in typical meetings doesn't happen, or we are able to work through it really quickly. And so, they used to call me PowerPoint killer when I was at HP because we would do meetings that with hand-drawn images and people had to leave their PowerPoints at home.
That's great. Yeah, that's great. So thank you, Lloyd. Let me check here. We've got Mike. Mike, do you want to say your question out loud? I think you're allowed to do that.
Maybe not.
Oh, maybe you can't. All right, you said in the
He doesn't have a
pre-chat you couldn't.
microphone.
Yeah, yeah, okay. So he says, and there's Paul has a question as well. Did you have to develop a different style of listening?
That's a great question. There is a different style of listening. There is, sorry, I started to share. It's a different style of listening that you develop. And sometimes we talked about it as like listening filters, where you're listening for each conversation, you're listening for certain content. And so we would have a conversation where you talk about the future vision. And we would say, if in 5 years you're a super successful company and you have changed the world with your products, what would that look like? And we would discuss that. And then if somebody says, yeah, but we don't have the right system in place or something, we'd say, wait, hold on. That is going to go in a different conversation where we talk about the barriers that are keeping us from the future. But so like I might put on a listening filter for future aspirations, and that would be all I would write down while I'm in that conversation. And then later, we go back and catch that when we talk about the current state and the things that are likely to get in the way. So we have a way of working with the people to get the right information out. And I think that what happens to me over time, like I would sometimes go into a meeting where I don't really understand the technology that they're talking about very much, but I do understand energy and I do understand when I hear something important. So I have my back to the people and I'm drawing on the wall. And when something is really important, it lands with a certain energy. And so I know what to write and what to draw. And I know the things that are less important that I can omit. So the listening kind of becomes a sort of a medium where you're taking in energy and you're translating it into images.
That's great. And I think he had a follow-up, but I think you just answered. He said, do you look for visual clues in the speaker for what they wanted to get across? But I think your answer covers that. But you want to say more, you can.
Um, well, I have an encyclopedia of images in my head, but then also if I'm doing I will go and do a bunch of research before a meeting. So one time I had to do a meeting that was all about little motors. So I had to learn what little motors look like in all different kinds of plant, like factories and different kinds of things. So I just learned a lot about little motors and I could draw them and I could turn them into superheroes or turtles or whatever. And I was ready to go. So I don't know if that answers the question, but
Yeah, it's good. It answers more, I think. And we got one more from Paula before we come back, or maybe one and a half from Paula. It says, did you participate in any specific training to help you with this visualization?
yeah, there are some good teachers of how to do this kind of visual recording. There's a place in San Francisco called The Grove. I took some workshops from. There's a woman named Michelle Booth Stone, who I took workshops from. The organization, the IFVP, International Forum of Visual Practitioners, has conferences and has people who teach classes through them. There's a woman in San Francisco named Nevada Lane. My son just took a workshop with her, which I was very excited about. She teaches stuff in San Francisco and maybe other places. So I think going through the IFVP, you can find some good leads.
Cool. Thanks. All right, she's got a follow. Oh boy, now they're all right. We'll hit these questions quick and then we'll come back. What was your most difficult product?
I've had some difficult projects where, well, that's a good question. I've had some projects where I've had clients that were just not capable to get to the end of it because of their own challenges. And I had to, end it before we finished because they couldn't make decisions, So, and we've had corporate meetings that kind of went sideways because we would interview people before, and we would plan the meeting for a certain to have certain conversations happen, and then when we got in the room, they blew things up by behaving badly, and it can be difficult. You know, things, when you go into a high stakes meeting and you're facilitating it, things can get crazy sometimes. And so you have to be really, it's great when you're working with an experienced team and you've done lots of meetings because you have tricks and ways of pivoting and changing the flow of things on the fly. And so,
Nice.
and I tend to think that comic artists are some of the most resilient people in the world. We have to be, because things are always changing. And so one of my beliefs is that we're well equipped for that kind of thing, to be able to reinvent, pivot, change, make adjustments.
That's great. Well, you've got two questions here, and then we really will let you come back to it that I think they're related.
Okay, I'm gonna show you a cartoon.
How did you have to change your art styles for Mike again? You've always had a cartoony style, but I assumed you had to strip it down even more.
When I first went to HP, they said to me, "We don't draw people here." And I was like, "What?" Because that was how I showed everything. You know, I'd show two people arguing, or I'd show two people shaking hands, or like my way of illustrating any concept almost was showing someone looking at something with some surprise or interacting with something. So people were really a big part of what I did. And they wanted us to draw these little like stand-ins, like little popsicle stick people, because, and they had a good reason for it. They didn't want, you know, to see gender or, you know, any stereotype. They didn't want people to like have problems with the way we drew people. So we got used to drawing these little, you know, kind of stick figures. And I cheated a little though, because I would make my stick figures kind of animated and kind of like expressive. And they were okay with that. They let it slide. But so I did, and I did have to really train myself out of being a smartass all the time, because as a cartoonist, I was, you know, I was a wise ass and just really sarcastic sometimes. And, you know, I had to change my approach to be more of a medium and listen for the intent, listen authentically, and come up with images that, you know, weren't I wasn't editorializing anymore. I was really trying to have honor for what was being said. And that made me good at what I did, because people saw their words and they believed that I captured them authentically, and they felt, you know, it's powerful when you have an idea and you say it and it goes on the wall.
Great. Related. All right. Okay, this is from Logan. He says, on cartoons, do they still have strong influence to change behavior of the readers, or is there more dismissive? Is it just for kiddos? And then we'll let you get back to it. Does that make
Oh,
sense?
I can't really answer that.
Yeah. Seems pretty clear that it does work, because otherwise.
I mean, in the context that I use it, it's, I mean, I don't know if it changes behavior, but we use it as a tool to allow behavior. So we use it as a facilitating tool to help people deal with complex content and to manipulate content, because it becomes somewhat tangible and plastic when you put it out into a form where it can be erased or changed or moved around or, you know, added to. So it becomes this extension of your mind, really.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's great. Okay, it's back to you. Back to you, Lloyd. No more questions for a minute.
All right, I'm sharing my screen. And I'm going to I'll give you a little 10-minute. Can you see that?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay, I'm coming over here by my tablet. So I just want to tell you a little bit about why I think comic artists are like maybe underappreciated, and maybe there's an extended way that we can think about what this tool has to offer. So, this is one of us comic artists, and we're sitting there, and you might, if you just think about what we do from a technical perspective, maybe we know a little bit about glue, we know about ink, we can draw little boxes and put pictures inside, and in a lot of ways that's the way people think about cartoonists, but it's just a small part. So she says, I make comics, I make shit up. That's what we do. And then when we start thinking about what we can do with that, we think about Mickey Mouse, the Mickey Mouse head, and we think about entertainment. And we think, I did, that that's the way to go. And you can do comic books, you can do merchandise, you can do stuff on the web. And if you make it really big, you can do videos and games, and you can get famous. But that's a small field, and it's kind of, perhaps shrinking. But then if we think about the actual cluster of skills you have as a comic artist, you actually also have this big thing called storytelling. And storytelling, is an entertainment thing, but it also is, in a business context, they call it world building. It's about talking about things that don't exist yet, complex things, worlds. And it allows you to imagine the future. So comic artists who can write stories can do all of this imaginative thinking and communicate it visually and verbally. Nobody else really, other than comic artists and maybe filmmakers, moves so fluidly between the left brain and the right brain, using images and using analysis and logic and everything together. We also connect ideas to emotions. And by telling stories in the business context, we tell stories, it's a way of giving people transparency and earning trust. So these are all things really needed in business, and they're all things that we're really good at. The next box, I would say, is curiosity. So comic artists are super curious people. And when I talk about it in terms of business, that means we're excellent at doing research, and we're excellent at doing structured critical thinking. So when you're planning out your comic strip and you're planning the pages and how you're going to communicate your ideas to your audience, you are, I would say, doing structured critical thinking. You're designing an experience for a reader that's more than something that's simple. It's quite a complex cognitive tool that you have, and we kind of take it for granted. When you're framing things for your reader, it's very similar to what I'm doing in a corporate room when I'm framing a conversation for a bunch of corporate leaders to talk about what are we going to design next. It's exactly the same. It's making information digestible. And then what's really important about curiosity is discernment. And I think in the age of AI, discernment is going to be a superpower that's going to be very much needed because the bots don't do it. And what these things become in the business context is called strategy, and it's called vision, are the two biggest things that the CEO cares about. The next one is empathy. I think comic artists and artists in general tend to be sensitive people and compassionate people and people who care about human relationships. We connect ideas to emotions for readers. So when we write for a reader, we're making a human connection, an intimate connection. Business needs that in every way. And also courage, care and respect, and moral clarity. I think when you have a comic artist in the room working in a corporate space, that may be a person bringing moral clarity in the drawings and the images that are being discussed. Has the potential for that. And now, I think, I've read recently senior leaders in corporations talk about three crises happening in business, in government, and the world, and they are trust, discernment, and moral clarity. So I think that should tell us that comic artists and the skills that we possess put us in a position where we can go in and help in these areas, and we can do beneficial things for business and society. And I've been able to do that in my career. I've moved into these different places. I've done some stuff in government, I've done some stuff in business. And while it's not super easy to get in the door, it is, the skills that you possess are things that are going to be really needed in the coming years, and they're welcomed. That's my soapbox.
It's a good one. You want to take a question? You want to keep going?
I think I'm good, but we can refer to the picture if you want, and I'm going to make my camera go over here, and I'll take some more questions. Sure.
Yeah. Anybody from there? Because I might have one, but I would rather. Well, I'll ask mine. Thinking about both what I know of your career prior and then career, with this side of things. Do you ever struggle with some of the companies, who they are, with who these companies are, as like especially say in the last 3 months doing business with Amazon, as much as it might be troubling prior, doing it today seems almost really hard to do. So I wonder how you balance that one.
Yeah. Well, I have a couple of thoughts about it. I mean, certainly, I I'm not on Amazon anymore, and
Yeah. No, I
I
wasn't putting you on the spot on
I
Amazon. I
I
just
mean, it is. You have to decide where you want to work. When I had a chance to go to Amazon and start a team, I really I had to think of whether that was going to work for me and my values.
yeah.
And it was an opportunity that was really interesting, and almost I couldn't say no because um, being able to work there meant not only was I working with Amazon, but I was working with hundreds of other companies. And if you were to ask me, I like to work with companies that actually know who their customers are, actually sell products, and want to have a strategy to, delight their customers and deliver something good to the world. And what's happening in business now, especially like the AI stuff, is there are lots of big speculative stories being told. And I'm not really that interested in helping people tell those stories that are based on sort of speculative stuff where they're trying to raise and lower the value on the stock market. It's much more satisfying to work with companies that are really trying to solve customers' problems. And in the times when I was able to do that, it was very satisfying. And I've worked with some healthcare companies where the people were in tears because they were solving things that they really cared about and they were really passionate about. And that is wonderful. And so, yeah, it was a mixed bag working at these tech companies because there were not every day did I feel that good about my contribution, but a lot of times I did. And now, and I earned some money for a while because it was important to me at the time. And now I've been able to go out on my own and I can really be choosy about who I work with. And it's nice. And I like to work with individuals who are, working on things for themselves, working on their careers, working on their, transforming their lives. It's really quite satisfying. So yeah, the corporate space it's not always pretty. So you have to navigate that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great answer. Do you think, just add on to this and then we can turn it over, but do you think your working with them has impact on some of their culture or their, I mean, it clearly does on a one-on-one thing. But I just wonder if you've seen any of that.
Yeah, well, what we always did was to bring people into a room and create an intimate situation where issues could be discussed, and everyone was treated very. Everybody was voices were heard, and we had ethics in what we did that I thought was really really strong, and so what I was always trying to do in the corporate world was to alleviate suffering wherever I can, because I would work with teams who were under a lot of pressure, who, there was high expectations for what they were expected to sell or make happen. And so throughout companies, there are decent people who are under a lot of pressure. And when I can help alleviate some suffering, I would say suffering and people would laugh, but I really did see suffering inside companies. And I think that our team, when we worked with a sales team or we worked with a team that was trying to move a product, we made things easier for them and made them able to communicate more clearly and like bring a little more vulnerability to the relationship, because we were trying to go from that thing I described where people show up with the PowerPoint and they talk and it's very kind of impersonal, to creating situations where people come into the room, everybody's on a level playing field, they get to talk about difficult issues and work through things. Sometimes, we would sometimes help to get a relationship between two groups that was really rocky and unfriendly and break through to a new space where they were able to reset the relationship and get to be friends again. So yeah, I mean, we did a lot of work that was sort of therapeutic, in a way.
Yeah.
It was
Well,
all,
related,
all chasing the big dollars, no doubt about that.
yeah.
But I think I've left some teams, I would get some great notes from people that say, working with your team was the highlight of the year for us. And it always felt good when we were able to go in and help.
Yeah, that's great. And you said this just before we started the Zoom call, about healing. If you recall what you said, we were talking about, helping people heal from wounds of childhood, about art. And maybe you could, just because I think it's relevant and
Yeah.
it didn't come up yet.
Well, I'm teaching a workshop in Italy next spring called Extreme Travel Journaling, where you travel around the Italian Riviera for 6 nights and 6 days, 7 days, and we'll have a journal and we'll capture a lot of stuff. We'll do some fun things like comics, but we'll also do some exercises that help you work with your inner critic and work with, like I remember I was at this summer camp with my son, and this little girl came up next to me. She was like 8 years old, and she goes, I was drawing something. She goes, "What's that supposed to be?" And I was reminded how they hurt us as little kids when we're drawing. And, somebody told her that she didn't draw well enough or something, and she is passing that pain on to someone else. And we're taught at a very young age not to like our drawings or our handwriting and the marks that we make. And I just hate that. It makes me so sad. So I love to teach workshops with people where I try to go under that. Like, why is it that some marks that you make on the page with a crayon or something can make you feel bad about yourself? That needs to be examined. And, through play and through, humor and having fun with art, you can start to heal those wounds. And so I'm sort of dedicated to that. And I feel that way about men's work and being around men. I think that men are holding in a lot of feelings and a lot of pain that ends up causing them to have health problems. And so like now I'm sort of dedicating myself to alleviating some suffering in that way too.
That's great. It's great. And so, so relevant to what our classes are about and what I hope comes out of our students. Some of them come as drawers and some of them come as not. And even the ones who do come as drawers, sometimes being good at it can also be a burden to carry because you feel a lot of pressure to do something with it. And so that's great. Let me look in the chat here. And if you've got a picture of your extreme journaling, I do think you should share it with us. But
Well, if anybody wants to reach out to me, I'll send you a link. The
yeah.
registration is open for next spring,
Mhm.
and I'm going to be doing some things in Portugal too. So if you want to reach out to me, I'll put you on the list.
Cool. Um, so in the chat, there's a question from Mike Rohde that I'm going to be careful not to answer because I'll probably say some things I shouldn't say in public.
I probably will too.
Yeah, well, I'll let you do it then. Says, do you think that AI would be capable of doing this type of cartooning in the future? So I'm gonna let you take that if you want.
The type of cartooning, perhaps, because it's pretty simple. But the thing is that um, to make it work, it really requires more than just the cartooning, just the drawing. The drawing, I suppose, because I had a thing happen where I went on GoDaddy and where they have my where they have my URL, and it fed me something that was a cartoon drawing, and I looked at it and I was like, wow, that looks like my friend Dennis drew it, but it looked pretty good, and so what AI does is so beautifully is to make a facsimile of something real. But something real is something different because it has meaning and it helps to move something along. So yeah, it'll be able to make stuff that looks like what we do. And there's going to be, as I'm thinking about my picture here, there's going to be areas in the discernment where there will be big mistakes made by AI, and people will end up in legal trouble. People will there will be great opportunities for us as cartoonists to go in and fix errors that are made by AI. I believe that to be so true. Having my experience with PowerPoint, I mean, I've made millions of dollars because PowerPoint sucks so bad in the way it's used. And so I'm hopeful for all of you that AI will provide you a gravy train like that as well. I know that lawyers are going to be, it's going to be really good for them. I know that because I've been in meetings where that's been discussed and how lawyers need to be put into the process of an AI generated project at the very beginning instead of like doing a legal check at the end, because there's so many places where in the process of using generative AI where risk can be taken on, and so good for them. It's going to be really interesting to see how it all shakes out. It's an amazing tool, and it doesn't do what people do,
Yeah.
and it does what PowerPoint does very like what I described. It makes something look very convincing. That's not necessarily truthful or accurate in any way. So to me, it's full of a lot of liability.
Yeah. You said that way more diplomatically than I was about to, so that's good. And though I think, you're talking about that 85-foot room and drawing on the wall in that conversation, like you're really advocating for a human interaction in business and seems like even just the word AI has already suggested we're getting rid of that. So yeah, well, I'll table my comment. Got another. Mike is asking all the questions. You guys got to jump in.
Mike, I love it, Mike. Bring them.
He says, "How often do you have to sign an NDA, and do you have some special insurance around this?"
I'm on NDA 100% of the time. So it makes it so that I can't really show my work, which
Hmm.
is challenging. So I have to make like generic stuff to show people.
Hmm.
They're always asking to see something I did for another company, and then I have to explain, would you like me to show your secrets to someone else? And so it is, It's totally NDA. My last, like, so for 10 years, I was under NDA all the time.
Wow.
And
Is there a point where,
I do have
sorry?
insurance in case somebody trips on my markers or something, and it's like liability insurance. And I have errors and omissions insurance, just to be safe. Yeah.
Yeah. Is there a point where the NDA ends? Like once can we see your sketches for Airborne now that it's out in the world?
Yeah, I don't think I had an NDA with Airborne because they were a
Hmm.
mom and pop company when I started with them. But no, when you work for the big companies, sometimes you can't even talk about working with them because there's a lot of fear about corporate espionage. And
Hmm.
we would use this plasticky material which we'd roll out on the walls and draw on it with dry erase markers. It was beautiful, and we would smash it all up at the end of the night, and it would be shredded because it
Hmm.
had company secrets on it.
Wow. Fascinating. I wouldn't, yeah, it makes sense. Okay, so I've got one. I mean, I think you've hit on this, but maybe we'll just dial you in specifically for my students when most of them see this recorded when they're not in other classes. Um, you know what? You're a 20-year-old college student. You're interested in making comics or animation. What are some things either you wish you'd thought about when you were their age, or some things that you'd advise them to do so that they're both ready to be the comics things, but ready to make some jumps into some other avenues.
I think one thing would be to, get some business skills, take some business classes and, because you're going to be in business as an artist, whether you're selling in a gallery or whether you're publishing or whether you're, you know, getting involved with a video game company or something, you're going to be dealing with contracts, you're going to be dealing with complex stuff, and you're not going to be doing the same thing your whole career. I think, like for me, I've reinvented myself like 8 times.
Hmm.
And I think it's just happening faster and faster. And there will be things that will pop up where there will be some nice budgets for certain kinds of projects. And for 5 years, maybe that certain kind of project will be the hot thing. And you have to be flexible enough to go and do some of that work and learn some technology, do some of that work, get in on it while it's popular. And then they'll invent something that makes it go away because there'll the tendency is everything that's new and cool gets commodified and gets, AI takes it over or whatever, and it doesn't exist anymore. And that's just going to keep happening faster and faster. So that requires kind of understanding how business models work and how to make money out of a thing and how to find the budget where it exists and the customer who has a need. So that's all business stuff. It's not hard to understand, but you need to look into it. And then the other thing is like being really curious about what's coming next and really, diving deep into things you're curious about and doing comics about it, doing explainers. Like when you learn about something that fascinates you, make a little explainer comic out of it and then distribute that so that you start to be seen as a person who figures things out, makes them visual, makes them understandable and digestible. And if you have that kind of power and people can see that you can do it, you're going to be in demand.
Yeah.
And it may turn into video, it may turn into something else because the technology is going to keep spinning and being crazy. And you just have to be more flexible than your environment. But the thing is that you've got the tools to be the most flexible. Like I know like an engineer that's coding at a tech company, they don't have the flexibility that you have as a comic artist. They might be well paid today and not working tomorrow.
Yeah. Well, your larger point there, the large part of it, the making explainers. We just in my advanced class we finished doing nonfiction comics. And we had a whole certificate on making nonfiction comics last year, and like as I tell them, and I told you just before, like the opportunities to work for DC Comics or Marvel or the newspapers at this point are pretty slim, but the opportunity to step into someplace and say, hey, I can use these skills to explain stuff to you. People are hungry for it and they really appreciate it. And I mean, obviously your career speaks to that hugely. Yeah. So I think we've got one more question. We could take more from Mike, but this is your times to get anybody else wants to jump in who's not Mike. Not that we mind, Mike.
Thanks, Mike.
But he does ask, it sounds like you made more money doing this other work than you did as a comic strip or even product design. Would that be accurate? Seems
Well, yeah, because I was in a job. I was in a corporate job and I got a salary. And it's this crazy thing where the money comes in the mail every 2 weeks. And I had never had it in my life until I started
hmm.
working in the corporate world. And they will pay you to go on vacation and stuff. So it is, yeah, it was good. And making and doing comics was just, I scraped by for years. It, the newspapers didn't pay me that much. But there was it over time. It grew, and my syndication was fairly decent before it fell off a cliff when the newspapers went out of business.
Yeah.
So I've been, scraping. I've been looking for a way to make it pay my whole career, and I had some good years on doing corporate stuff, and very, very interesting. I like to throw myself into intense situations. And so doing those high stakes meetings was fascinating for me, like from an anthropological perspective, seeing how these people operate in corporations. I was super curious about it.
Yeah. Mike got something in here, which sorry, Mike, I'm not trying to, oh, all right, but I have a question for you, but we've got one from Danielle. Says, what is extreme travel journaling and how does it relate to what you do? I think maybe a little clarification on that.
Okay, so how it relates? Well, it relates in that it's fun and it's comics, and I am now semi-retired, and I like to travel, and I live in Europe, and so and as I said, I like to help people get in touch with their creativity, and so it started as sort of a hobby, sort of a thing on the side, but it fulfills an internal need for me to have fun and to travel around and take people on interesting excursions and then show them how to have fun making art.
Yeah, it sounds awesome. I know you have to go, so I'm gonna
I have to
say,
jump.
I just want to say one thing before I thank you, is your comment about your all the way through about the flexibility of a cartoonist. I don't think I've heard anybody talk about it that way. And I think that's a really good reminder for all of us and for my students to think about, I think they tend to think, oh, I'm just this person who can draw pictures, but you're speaking about them as this really powerful creature that can do all kinds of things.
Yeah,
Um,
like I said earlier, I don't know of anyone else who moves fluidly between the right brain and the left brain. And that is a really powerful superpower. And storytelling is a superpower as well. So I think, don't think of yourself as small, and don't fall for the thing that soft skills are less important because that is proving to be, old school thinking that is not relevant for today.
yeah, that's a perfect note to end on. Lloyd, this has been just delightful. I'm so glad we could reach you all the way across the world. And I think my students will love it. And thank you all for joining us. And we'll have a good night in
Thank you,
Portugal.
Nick. Thanks,
All right.
everyone.
Thanks, you
Ciao.
guys. Thanks all for coming. And thanks, Lloyd. Have a good evening. Have a good day,
Bye.
everyone. Thanks you all for coming. All right. I guess I'll end it. Thanks, Lloyd.
Thanks, Nick.
Stop the recording.